Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. We've got myself, Salim from Empower IT. We've got Suban and Rowena also from Empower IT. And we've got our special guest for today, Kevin Brown, who's from ENTARC. We'll just give everyone 30 seconds to make their way into the webinar and then we'll begin. Can I just get a confirmation that everyone can see my screen?
Yes, this.
And can everyone hear me loud and clear? Kevin, is it okay from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. Can hear you loud and clear. I think you're getting a lot of thumbs up as well.
All right, guys, I think we'll start. We've given enough time for people to come in. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for making the time to join us today. Hopefully, we'll make it short and sweet and right to the point and help you guys understand how to use Microsoft investments and technologies that you currently have to improve your business. I'd like to start by first doing an acknowledgement of country. Empower IT Solutions acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and would also like to pay our respects to elders past and present. So the agenda for today, I'll be covering just the webinar overview and purpose, and then I'll be introducing Kevin and then handing over to Kevin for some slides and also a demo that he'll be showing us some of the Microsoft technologies that he's been preparing for us for today. So I guess what's the purpose of today's webinar? Why are we all here? It's common that we hear from our customers nowadays that they continue to invest and look at tools and technologies that are going to help them make work better, increase their productivity, increase their efficiency, increase data optimization, how data flows between individuals and teams, and sharing data just across the organization. But what seems to be the issue is that sometimes there's an overload when it comes to productivity tools. There are so many tools out there. I think I was reading an article. There are more than, I think, 10,000 tools that are related to productivity right now. And that number is continuing to increase day by day. So I've just kind of snapshotted some of the tools that you guys might already be familiar with, just to kind of make the point about, well, productivity is a big thing. There's a lot of investments, excuse me, happening in the industry. And so what's Microsoft doing on their side of things? Some people will say, well, Microsoft's ecosystem is quite sophisticated, quite advanced. They've also built up their suite of tools. And it comes to the point now that, it's hard to understand, I guess, where things are at and how to use existing Microsoft technologies to move forward and implement those in your environments. So I guess the questions that our customers are asking, how do we leverage our current Microsoft licensing to do more? So you might have existing premium licenses that include a whole suite of little modules from Microsoft. You might have basic, you might have standard licensing. What comes with those licensing and what can you do with them, in your business to help improve productivity? So there is a large tool set, and sometimes that can be confusing. What are the best practices to implement those tools? I've seen customers where individuals and teams pick up different tools and they end up in a situation where, the tools are not integrated, the data is not flowing between one tool set to another, you get out-of-date information in certain tools. So these are common issues that all customers are experiencing. Is it different when you implement these tools for a person as an individual or as a department? and how is it different, and how do we use best practices to implement those tools over the whole organization? And that's key, because the efficiencies gauge is really when information can be accessed easily and widely throughout the organization. And when do you need to upgrade your Microsoft licensing? And it's no surprise that Microsoft licensing is a very complicated thing. Sometimes we speak to Microsoft experts, and they have to check their notes and look up documentation. So it's just the nature of Microsoft. They have so many things out there, and it's important for us to connect you guys with the right people. So Microsoft continues to build the 365 platform. They continue to add more tools. A tool that you will hear about today that you may have not heard about previously is called Loop. That term might be, or that name might be new to some of you guys. The good news is that integrations are becoming tighter and more streamlined on the Microsoft toolset. Where Microsoft tools were 2 years ago, I'll give the same comparison to where Microsoft Teams was 5 years ago. Very ad hoc, clumsy when it came to integrations, and that's because what they did is, in certain instances, they bought certain companies that had a tool set already available, and then they just integrated those tool set into their platform. But what they've done in the last 2 years is, and I've seen these tools come a long way, they've made them become a lot more streamlined, and the integrations have been a lot more effective, especially when it comes to Microsoft Office, Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, things like that. And like I mentioned before, sometimes picking the right Microsoft tool can be confusing. Do I use Planner? Do I use To Do? Do I use Loop? When do I use workflows? So much information is out there. How do we navigate this journey? So at Empower IT, we're here to help you guys. First and foremostly, we're here to help you understand how do you maximize your current investments that you have in Microsoft technologies. We also like to connect you guys to the right expert, to the right team. We here know that Empower IT cannot be experts at every single tool that Microsoft has to offer. So it's about really connecting you guys to people who have implemented these solutions previously and successfully. And at the end of the day, whichever tool set you decide to use, our function or our job at Empower IT is to ensure that these tools are secure, they're integrated, they're backed up, and your IP, your intellectual property, is protected as much as possible. With that, I'd like to introduce Kevin. I've been working with Kevin for about 5 years or more on different projects and different clients, and I felt that Kevin has a lot of value to add when it comes to the Microsoft technology stack. Just a bit of background about Kevin. So Kevin Brown is a managing director and founder of a company called ENTARC. He's got over a decade worth of experience dealing with C-level executives, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, larger organizations especially. And what's great is that Kevin can bring a lot of that enterprise experience to the SMB market. Anywhere from, if you're a customer with 10 to 200 users, you're in the SMB space. And what's important is to understand that Microsoft have been targeting the SMB market for the last, few years. And, that's the area where a lot of the transformation, a lot of the productivity gains are happening. So Kevin works with focused teams in order to deliver the solutions to the organizations. His engagements are very intimate when it comes to understanding customers' objectives, understanding customers' business, and the deliverables, I guess, when it comes to business productivity and efficiency. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kevin. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Salim. Let me bring my presentation on, and you can please confirm once you can see it. Can everyone see my screen, the presentation now?
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, thank you again, and welcome to today's session. Better rules and better tools for better business is at the heart of our philosophy at ENTARC. As Salim mentioned, we focus on organizations with 200 staff or less. And what it means in simple terms is to really make the most of what you already have, because the potential for optimization of your resources in general is often quite significant. So Empower IT have kindly asked me to cover some aspects specifically on Microsoft 365 and the Power Platform, which I look forward to taking you through today. Hopefully providing you some practical examples on rules and tools that you can implement in your business to improve your productivity. So let's jump in to the second slide. And on screen, you'll see a high-level overview of Microsoft's ecosystem, in particular containing the Microsoft 365 suite and the Power Platform, which we're focusing on today. But before we dive into it, I would like to draw your attention actually to the outside of the dome, because I'd like you to imagine the scenario of your staff and yourself turning up to office and you can't use your systems. Because what would that impact have on your business? And have you simulated that scenario? It's something that we see happen more and more, especially for small businesses with the increase of cybersecurity threat. And the way I like to compare it is, unfortunately, with the small to medium-sized businesses, is it's as if you're driving the car without the seatbelt and the airbag. It's an accident that you're literally waiting to happen, and not a matter of if, but when. So therefore, I would like to take you primarily at the beginning through a few examples on what inclusions Microsoft has in security and compliance, so that it initially covers a primary lesson that we take away from our engagements with clients, which is always putting the security and compliance first, followed by the productivity. So let's look at a few practical examples that are often underutilized in Microsoft subscription. On screen, you'll see 3 examples. Now, the subscription we highly recommend to the small to medium-sized businesses is Business Premium, because it comes with extensive capabilities on security that you can leverage today. And the ones I put on screen are around the multi-factor authentication, the single sign-on, and conditional access. Now, multi-factor authentication is really, really important. It is a great first barrier for any potential threat that you may face. And when I refer to the multi-factor authentication, it's not the SMS token that you get sent on your phone, because that really is no longer best practice. It's about using the Authenticator app. So please take that on. It's something that's really increasingly becoming important. If you have it installed and are using it, I would also encourage you to start looking at single sign-on, because with the single sign-on on all of your enterprise applications, you can not only consistently make the usability more friendly, but also you are constantly monitoring your logins across the key applications, and therefore can be better protected by Microsoft's system. Conditional access is the next tier from that. So conditional access is really around leveraging policies that you put in place for your organization that can be easily set up, such as if you're operating only in Australia, where you would expect that only logins should be occurring from Australia. If you're very strict on your device compliances, that they need to be patched, you can set policies that they are always meeting the latest security patches. An interesting one that often gets unnoticed is the policies around personal phones. As Philip mentioned earlier, there's been work on those areas because of the flexibility that companies do want to provide to their staff. And it's not everyone's in a position, or hardly anyone is in a position, to actually provide company phones to all of their employees. But with Microsoft's policies, you can actually apply a policy to the personal phone so that staff can use their personal phone, but you can be rest assured that all of your company data is actually protected and encrypted on their device. And even in instances when a device may be lost personally, you have full control and can remotely wipe it. So those are some practical examples I'd like you to take away that are really, really important. Second topic on compliance, another key element that often is not familiar that clients are not familiarized with, but are included in your license. These fall under information protection and data loss prevention. And what I mean by that is the baseline is around data classification. So Microsoft gives you the capability to classify your data. And at a high level, an example would be to distinguish between files and documents that you are purely having for internal purposes. And also another example would be if you have highly confidential data. What that allows you to do, if you use the data classification, it will prevent even accidental sharing from breaching your policies, because a lot of the issues that are faced by companies is actually accidental happenings from staff sharing information that they didn't intend to share, sending an email out with an attachment to a mailing list that they didn't intend to send it out. But once that attachment leaves the organization, that's out of your hands. With the information protection and the data loss prevention, you can take control of it and be rest assured that you have a full overview of everything that you store, where it's stored, and what degree of sensitivity you have. Now, what is really great about this, you can see it applies across the Microsoft ecosystem. So those sensitivity labels will be carried through the applications that you use so that they are seamlessly integrated. So again, a topic that is really key for your path moving forward, but often not familiar with being included in your subscription. All right, I hope those examples were helpful for you in terms of security and compliance. Let's jump into productivity. Now, Salim had a great slide on screen earlier, which really displayed the vast amount of tools out there. I've picked a few that I'm hoping will give you great examples in your day-to-day practice that will help your business. And one of them is Loop. So Loop came out a couple of years back, but has been more actively developed and released with updates in the last 12 months. Understanding how these tools work is probably the biggest challenge. So I'm hoping that today's demo will give you a good example of how the information stored in one application feeds into your other applications, and therefore you can have best practices in place to actually optimize the use. Now, Loop is a great tool for collaboration and work management. It will give you enhanced productivity, and we'll run through some examples now. So let me share my other screen with you and just bring it online. And again, if that's visible to everybody, please just give me a thumbs up. Yep. Excellent. Good. So this is the landing page of Loop, and I'll just take you through a high-level overview. So what you see here is the workspaces, which is the first category that you would be working in once you have it opened. The workspaces is sort of your space that you would define with your teams according to maybe departments or project teams, and simply use that as a category or landing for all of your collaboration. So let's just create a new workspace, and we'll call it Webinar Demo. You can add a nice icon to it. Let's use the camera. This is where you can also then immediately share it with your colleagues and invite them to be part of it. We won't add any files for now. Great. Now you can see the structure or the format of the application itself. So what I'd like to draw to your attention is you're in a workspace, which you have created, and then you are at the second level having pages. And on these pages, it's like a whiteboard. You can work on it. It's really targeted towards creative users that just want flexibility on their content, but want to have increased collaboration. You can even create subpages. So there's no limit to the subpages. You can create a hierarchy. So it's, again, a very, very flexible arrangement. I'll delete this one for now because we don't need it. But again, just drawing to your attention the hierarchy behind it, that you have extensive control on what you'd like to use. Another great feature is the template gallery, which we will be using in today's example. So if we look at this, they give you some examples on how to probably implemented in your department or business. We can use the marketing plan as an example today, which I just bring in. And it gives you the flexibility that even if you use it as a starting point, for now, you can then make changes. And once you've made those changes, they give you the opportunity to save it as a new template of your own. So again, it's meant to make life easy for you to get started and continuously use the tool moving forward. Now let's go through this top to bottom and get an idea of what you can do. At the very top, it lets you, for example, add a little bit of color if you'd like to, just to make the page a bit more attractive. But then scrolling down, you can see it's really built on intuitivity. So you can add content as you wish. It's a blank page. You can feel free to fill out what you'd like. The proposed structure here is really as you would go about with the marketing plan, work on a summary and draft up what you think is important, followed by a few goals. Now, here's where we see the first element being a table. Now, that table is fully editable and you can add columns as you wish. You can change the column type. You have a few options available out of box. You can change it to a person if you want to assign it to somebody. The voting element is also great, which lets you, for example, gather feedback on ideas or goals you have, and you can simply vote, collect those responses. So the flexibility around it is fantastic. And you have a few other elements such as the labels, which will give you extra filtering capabilities with pre-built options there. What is key though, is that all of these elements, if you look at them on the screen, okay, what makes it different to the other tools that you've used? In Word, you can create a table. Yes, you can have metadata, but the key here is that you can actually share this table beyond within the app. So let's go through an example where I'd like to share this component to a user other than being in this loop application. What you would do is you would create what they refer to as a loop component. Now, by creating this loop component, you can copy it across the application suite. But interestingly, you can also see that these sensitivity labels that apply to a page, as I have on screen here, are also applicable to a component itself. So this is where I was coming from with the integrated security. If I were to copy this component right over here, let's take a copy and let's just navigate to another application such as an email. You can see I've drafted an email here and I'd like to have me working on those tables. This table is now fully presented in the email itself. And me as a recipient, I would be able to just open the email and fill out the table right there and then. I don't have to navigate away. I can fill out my ideas, my contribution immediately. And this is applicable for Teams chat and many other applications. So this is a true changer in terms of collaboration and productivity. It reduces the amount of times you need to click away, move back and forwards, and lets you more actively collaborate together. So I'm hoping
now, Kevin, just to clarify for everyone, this is like a live view from within the email. Is that correct? It's not just a one-off snapshot.
You're absolutely right. So let's just type into this one, goal one, and I haven't even sent the email out, obviously, but let's just type it into here. So what you would see is it immediately populated on my loop. So what you said there, Salim, is exactly right. It's a live real-time editing, and you can actually see it's now put my little user next to it because it knows I'm working on this in the email itself. And that's what you would get. So if you have multiple users on the page, you can see my user being listed here, and it would just list all the users, additionally show exactly where they're working on. Thanks for that question, Salim, because I think that's a great clarification. So now where we go to from here is another degree of how it integrates with the planner and the to-do. And you might be using both tools already. So understanding how it can actually help you is probably helpful. So let's just grab so the way you insert a new item is by, oh, well, that was obviously going to happen. Insert. Not sure what's going on here. Let's just go back down. Insert. There we go. So I'll scroll down. You have a lot of different options of inserting, and we won't be able to cover all of them today. But what you'll find is some additional templates. And this is where I wanted to draw your attention to. So the templates are going to be the inbuilt ones with Loop. But further down, you can actually see if you already have a planner that you use with your team for a project, you can even insert that here. So I'm going to just start with this. And you can see I've got a few plans that I have. And I'm just going to insert one of them to show you what that visually would look like. And once it loads, it's one and the same that you would have elsewhere. So what you may be using in Teams at the moment as a tab in your Teams channel, you can also use in Loop. And this is great because, again, the edits you make here will be immediately reflected in your planner and will be updating your team accordingly. So it is fully interactive. You can move items around just like you would elsewhere. Okay, so that's the first integration that hopefully is helpful. And the second one that I tried to show you earlier is the task list. Now, if we go to the task list, this is where using this template will allow you to set for tasks that you need completion of part of the project, but also assign them. So let's just assign a task to myself. Test task. Now. And I will just assign this to me. Oh, well, actually, to the demo user. With an expiry against it next week. Okay, so I've done this here and then. But if you use To Do as a tool that monitors all of your daily tasks that you want to work on, this is where it will now push the task into. So once we update the tab, there it was ready, you can see it's automatically coming here. And I can now complete my tasks that have been agreed on through Loop and assigned to me will pop up on my daily task. And if I need to work on these, I will be very comfortable to keep an overview of them right where I've been working before. Now, the difference you may ask is, oh, well, why would I use the planner and when would I use the task list? And it's a fair question. The differentiation is really the planner is having more, let's say, deeper connections within the Microsoft ecosystem. It will go and create a group. It will also create a mailing list. So the planner was originally created for project purposes and therefore had to accommodate those needs. They are more targeted towards longer projects that have, let's say, more deeper and granular control requirements. But you've never had anything that just gets you a sort of planner experience in a very similar setup. Because if you were to convert this into a board, you can, which is exactly the same as you would have with the planner. Let's call this in progress. You can create this on the go within Loop without having to create a more complex plan in Planner. So that distinction, even though both feed back into your to-dos, is something that you can take into account and therefore can more dynamically work on without overloading the Microsoft tenancy with umpteen different groups and channels. So if it's a smaller project, create a task list in Loop and work your way as you would in the planner. Now, one thing that is also great in the Loop is the meeting notes. And I don't know if you've been using this in your scheduled meetings, but if you navigate down to the Teams meetings at the bottom, you will see there is an agenda that can be used. And that agenda actually feeds back into Loop as well. So if you were to use the integrated agenda capabilities of the Teams meetings, you will have a history of all of your meeting notes right here that you can sort by week and always reflect back on. So that's another great way to display how the tools are integrating in the background and to keep your focus being in one space only. Okay, I'm hoping that has covered quite a lot in terms of Loop and given you an idea of how it actually integrates on the back end with To-Do and Planner. I'll jump back into the presentation. Give me 1 second.
Kevin, just a general question. If
Yep.
I was a customer that up to date, I haven't been using Planner, I haven't been using To-Do or Loop, this seems like it's a lot of information for me. What would you advise in terms of, going to investigate if these tools, are applicable for me, when I should use them, what are the scenarios I should be looking at, and potentially even coming back with questions after this kind of webinar?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, again, it really comes down to the business needs. What we do with our clients is we sit down and work out what are the tools you're using now, how can they complement each other better, and understanding their day-to-day practices. If you have internal resourcing for that, great. That's where I would start. I would start to try and understand how this integrated process can have a bigger impact on everyone's productivity on a day-to-day basis. But you need to look at it in a bigger picture and just understand how those tools are interacting. Going from Outlook into Loop, it can be overwhelming, but if you work thoroughly through this and understand your day-to-day pain points, that's where I would say is the starting point. Does that answer your question, Salim?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, no problem. Let me jump into the presentation and then we'll cover number 2. Okay, so now the second example, which you might be using already, and great if you are, is Microsoft List. Microsoft List is probably the first step towards a more consolidated and organized information management. So it's moving away from just having lists as such, but also creating the data around them. And I would like to take you through an example here as well to show you how lists in an example can be easily used in integration with the Microsoft Teams Approvals app and also Microsoft Forms. So let me go back into the other screen. Just flipping back and forward here. Okay, here we go. That should be back online. Good. All right, now here we are on list. Again, what you would start off with is creating a new list. Microsoft gives you some templates that are a great starting point that you can customize to your needs. What I'll be using today is a travel request. It simulates the scenario I mentioned of integrating a flow into Teams for approval. And if you're using the approval app in Teams, that's great. You'll find it being very familiar. If you're not, it will be an interesting aspect for you to consider. Travel request with approval, we start here and just hit create. Now lists is based on the SharePoint lists capability. And you will see that an entry here can be done in 2 ways. You can add an item through a user interface and fill out the columns that are defined, but you can also edit it in a grid view and fill them out as you go, just like you would in an Excel spreadsheet. You can categorize the columns, which are ultimately data fields, by what format of information you're entering. And they will then feed into your metadata. So let's do an example of a trip that we would like to do. Let's call it, we want to attend the Microsoft AI Summit. Okay, reason for travel. The requester could simply be me. Let's add myself as a requester. And you'll experience now the level of data you can enter is quite interesting. So it actually uses the location based. So you can see it's pulling up addresses. I'm just going to use Sydney as a city in general. you add your dates, which could be next week until the middle of until the end. Information, okay. Now costs associated, and then a hotel. Let's just stay at the Novotel in Sydney, Darling Harbour. And again, we can add some cost there too. That's fine. All right. If I hit save on this one, it populates it. Again, the key aspects here are you have different views, but it's also possible to add a new view. And another one would be, for example, the calendar. Now, if we were to add a calendar view to this to observe who's going on travel when, we could add that here as a start date. And you could also select what you'd like displayed. So we're displaying the title. It gives you flexibility to focus on the month or the week. We'll navigate to the month. And this is how you can see the entries. So if you were wanting to keep track of the different travel arrangements for your team, you could display them in a calendar view and have a clear oversight who's gone when. Most importantly, though, the approval flow. So let's have a look at what that experience looks like. So it says at the moment I haven't submitted the request yet. So let's click on this one. I'd like to submit the request, and the approver is going to be demo user. I can give some details, Sydney travel as discussed, and hit the submit button. Now, if I go to my teams with this user, I'm not so sure if you had this, but let's bring that just up here. I would have got a notification that I got a approval request. This approval request refers to what's been requested, and I can click on this, view the request. If I'd like to, in more detail, I have all the details needed. I can approve it straight from here, or I can come back, leave a comment, approved, and hit approve. Now that is a flow that comes out of the box, but can streamline significant processes for you. We see experiences across the board where these approval requests are handled manually. People lose track, but there are capabilities to streamline this. You may have specific roles in your company that are responsible for such tasks. They could create a list like this, use it as their reference, and manage it very efficiently, but also with clear processes in place. This is just one of an example, but there are many different examples that may apply to your business. And that's where a little bit of creativity comes into play to understand what are your specific needs and what will be working well with your team. But the capabilities and the customizations around it are significant. So working on this as a team and understanding what entry needs to happen and how you can streamline your process, this is a great example. I mentioned in my slide that it even includes forms. So let's have a look how forms works with Microsoft Lists. Let's say you're gathering those requests, not by entering them manually, or getting requests by email that then the person in charge would enter. You would like to just send out a request form to people that they enter themselves. And that's where forms comes in. So you would simply create a form, you'd add the fields that you want completed, and then you can circulate it to your team. And as soon as they enter those details, you will have them pop up on your list as a request that can then be submitted for approval. So that capability is fantastic. I mean, it's something that is pre-built. You don't need extra effort or resources allocated to do it. It doesn't require development. So it's a capability that you can use today. If you understand how you can roll it out in your department and what your needs are, and define the data you're capturing, you're ready to go. So I'm hoping that this example was another good reference for you to understand the capabilities of Microsoft Lists and how it works in conjunction with forms and the approvers in Teams. But with would love to hear thoughts if there are any questions. Salim, would you have any questions on that specific item?
So, Kevin, I guess when it comes to forms, and just to clarify a little bit for for the audience, so rather than having them log into the tasks view or the MS list, sorry, the list view, what we're saying is you could have a link to a form. Let's just say on your intranet, you could say travel request forms, click here. And that would go to a staff form that would then fill in, which you could kind of put all the fields as you would want your staff to see them. And then the approver could be on the back end, viewing all the submissions and then looking who's approved what and looking at the history and adding some more details. Is that right?
Exactly right. So that's how it would work. So that is a great reflection of a flow that you would implement and should optimize the user experience by offloading it to the users themselves who need to fill out the form rather than gathering it externally in different systems or in an Excel spreadsheet. So it's a great integrated flow that you can create for your department in this example. Exactly right. Using platforms you're using already, such as an intranet that you mentioned in SharePoint, and then having it embedded in there for people to fill out themselves.
Okay, and typically which process of the business would be a candidate for us to, or for yourself to look at with the customer? Is it the one that's taken the most amount of time? Is it the one that's the highest volume? Is it the one that has the most errors? Is it all the above?
No, it's a good question. Actually, I think talking to clients is where you reveal the true pain points. And I think it really comes down to having that conversation, understanding what is causing difficulty and creating inefficiencies. And the perception of that varies from client to client. There is no one size fits all saying, oh, well, it's the HR department that is struggling ever with requests like these. It might very well be an internal IT support person that's struggling with issues. Now you could use an issue request form, just like we did with the travel request. Create a form that is submitted internally for a first point of contact. There are many, many options. So it's hard to pinpoint it to a department. It can happen across the board, but it also reflects the vast applicability of these tools because they are so dynamic and can be used in many different contexts. Yeah.
Excellent. Also, Suvan and Michael, I know you guys are on the call, so feel free to jump in if you guys have any questions or you feel that any points can be clarified for our audience.
Okay. And we do have question and answers at the end. So if you have questions that you're throwing into the Q&A sections, I'm sure that will be monitored and we can answer them. So I'll carry on for now. The next item, and that's conscious of time, is the Power Platform itself. Now, the way I would describe the move from what we've seen, which is all within the Microsoft 365 suite, now it would be heading into a more licensed area. And that's where Salim said, when do you upgrade your license to actually accommodate these requirements? Now, the Power Application and the Power BI are great examples of what can be used within the Power Platform. They fall into a more data relationship model, which is by definition going to be a lot more sophisticated, but often an overkill. So therefore, Microsoft has the suite that we just showed you. However, there are plenty of use cases to justify when you would want to use the Power Apps. Now, this could be a webinar of its own, so therefore we've kept it to some examples on screen only. But ultimately, what we see happen often across different organizations is that Excel, as it is on screen, is still heavily used and relied on for more heavily needed data management. The threshold of moving from Excel into a Power Platform has dropped dramatically over the last years. It doesn't require as heavy lifting as it did, and you can utilize a Power Application that comes with the capabilities of data relationship a lot easier than you did in the past. And once you bring an unstructured data into a structured data format, that's when you can really unlock business insights as well. So through a tool like Power BI, you can tap into the data that you're now creating to visualize maybe inefficiencies that you weren't aware of before and your data accuracy. So these are great tools that will help you and are a little bit more granular in terms of your control around, for example, roles and permissions. Now that plays a big role in companies that need a more granular permission control on elements of data entry and as well as workflows. So what I've put on screen is two screenshots that are meant to highlight a little bit of what it looks like. You will see in the top screen the typical user interface of a Power App. And you'll see on the left-hand side a reflection of tables. Those tables are ultimately your data entry point, and each table will have a form which will look like this. And you enter your data, you can define the type. On top of this form is where you can see your workflow. And again, fully customizable, you can detect the workflow as to the steps that you follow internally and apply the conditions accordingly. So the level of customization you can apply and combined with the data relationship model basis, you can certainly, you're not seeing my screen? Okay.
I've had to hit the reload button. There was a reload button in the middle of the screen. I had to hit that, and then I saw your screen again. So there might have been just a sync issue.
Oh, okay. Is it, you can see it now? Can everyone else see it? Can I just get a thumbs up? Okay.
Yeah, I had the same thing. Once I hit the reload button, it was fun.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for the notice. So going back to the screen, so you'd see on the right-hand side a first impression of what that can look like. Again, it is quite extensive, and please do share feedback after this session. We will be gathering feedback on what other information you may have liked to have. We can certainly work towards having a more specific case presented. Microsoft offers some industry accelerators. I have put on screen the one that falls into the higher education space. And what that means is there's a different starting point. It comes with pre-built and common data sets that would be collected and managed so that you can actually feed off that to expand it into your more customized needs. Below you see the the Power BI dashboard, again, seamlessly integrated into this Power application. So you would have a column called dashboards, which you can customize, reflect data that you're allowed to see and are having permissions for. So it's a quite extensive upgrade from what we've seen before. Having said that, we are often convinced that a lot of the tools that are sitting in the productivity suite suit a lot of needs with small to medium-sized businesses, and they can leverage and optimize their productivity quite significantly without having to jump into a more sophisticated data model. If it is requirements, that's what is quickly identified, and we can act accordingly. Now, the next step up from this one, and that's a mention only, is the Business Central. Now, Business Central falls into the Dynamics 365 space, similar to the Power Platform, but it leverages also financials. So if your company relies on heavily financially dominating processes, you would want to look at a solution like this because it's an entry-level ERP that gives you the capabilities. But what I've highlighted on the screen is you can see how even that application natively integrates with the Power Platform itself, as well as Microsoft 365. So going back to that eco model that Salim mentioned, going back 5 years, you would not be having this leverage on tools. But what you can see happening, and especially what's yet to come, is that Microsoft suite and its native integration can be a great way to leverage and keep your data consolidated in a space and confined, protected at all times, and you're in control. You also have the benefit of working on a Power App. I'm just going to go back to this. The difference here is you are actually creating very valuable IP for your company too, that you're in full control of. So being able to customize it to your needs is a different solution to what you have elsewhere, which is with third-party apps that are sort of product developed by the companies that are providing them, where you have limited control. With the Power App, which is a much easier step to adopt and financially more attractive, you're in control and you're creating that IP for yourself. Okay, before we head into the Q&A, just how do we help our clients with this? A quick overview of what we represent. So ENTARC stands, in fact, for Enterprise Architecture, which is a structured framework to actually guide and coordinate a more sophisticated strategy, but aligning it with your business goals. So it's meant to be covering 4 primary domains. We focus today on the 2 middle ones, which is around the data and the applications. But what follows in initial engagements that we conduct is really understanding a client's needs, assessing where they are at, and then putting a path forward that aligns with your needs and also the capabilities you have. So we are very much focused and specialized on organizations with 200 and less employees, and understand that there are constraints in the industry. But what we look to do with ENTARC, and what I specifically am passionate about, is to bring technology that used to be reserved for large enterprises and approaches and frameworks that large enterprises have internal teams on with multiple staff to the SMB space that will be applicable to you in its essence, just like they are applicable to the enterprises. So I'm hoping that this gives you a good idea of what we do. I'd love to cover more content if we have another opportunity to dive into the other domains. But with that said, I'd love to hand over to the Q&A. Just another item, which is always a great takeaway that we leave with our engagements. If you aren't familiar, and this goes back to the cybersecurity aspects, next month is in fact the nominated Cybersecurity Awareness Month of October. Also not sure how many people are aware of that, but there is a great reference for the Essentials Aid where you can go and hop onto the website, get yourself familiar with what are really the bare minimum essentials you should be doing in terms of security, so that what we spoke about earlier will protect you from instances happening to you. So with that, Salim, I'd love to hand over to the Q&A. Thank you for the opportunity to do a presentation. I'd love to answer questions. If you need to reach out, we are North Sydney based, and my contact details are below too.
Excellent. So just, I guess, to let everyone know, the recording will be available. We had a question from Michaela. So when tasks are completed, will it automatically update the task?
Yes, that's a good question. Probably should have demonstrated it. Absolutely. So that's what, going back to what Salim mentioned with the real-time updating. So the tasks in loop will synchronize to your to-do, and wherever you are going to update them as completed, it will synchronize that activity as well. So that's what the beauty of that synchronization is. It happens instantly from each area that it synchronizes to.
Excellent. If anyone else has any questions, just feel free to post them in the Q&A tab. We'll give everyone a minute just to add their questions in. So I guess just to summarize, Kevin, we had a look at tasks, we had a look at to-do and loop, and that's kind of like a starting point, a basic starting point.
Yeah.
Then what we said, there's another Microsoft product. So in addition to Planner, there's also another Microsoft product called Microsoft Lists. And that's for more structured data. And you can have some flows around that. So if you want to send a form, someone submits a form for approval, it will go as an email to the person. They'll approve it, or it could be a notification in Microsoft Teams. Then that will come back to Microsoft Lists, and there's a database, if you like, of all those items. And then we said with Power Apps, that's next on the maturity level to give you a little bit more structured of a database or an application that can be customized to a customer's specific needs. So the question comes up, at what point would you look at Power Apps as opposed to, for example, an off-the-shelf system?
It's a good point. So I think to answer that, going back again to that transition from productivity to Power App. So if there is a use case to build up a data model, it's rarely found that you can do that with an off-the-shelf solution the way you can do it in the Power Apps. And that's, I think, where the, let's say, the edge with the Power App comes from, that you can actually build that data model up to your needs. And the interface of doing it is not like what it used to be before. That doesn't require heavy investment into developers that will build it up for you. So that threshold has come down significantly, so that even smaller companies themselves with some technical expertise, or the likes of Empower IT, there is a very, very little threshold now to build up those Power applications because of the integration through user interfaces set up and optimized.
Excellent. I'll just refresh my screen. All right, we've got no other questions. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Also, I'd like to thank Kevin. It's been great listening to all these informational items from covering the Microsoft stack. Guys, if you feel like Kevin can be of help to you guys, let your account manager know or reach out to Kevin directly. I guess just to kind of explain, we worked with Kevin on different customers on different projects, and a lot of the engagements with Kevin, he's got ad hoc as well as ongoing engagement. So ad hoc would be, okay, we're trying to achieve A, B, C. Let's work together. Empower IT covers you when it comes to security, the essential A, security, single sign-on, making sure your data is backed up, making sure intellectual property is secured, and then Kevin will can have a discussion with you about business processes, what you're having issues with, what you should be focusing on, et cetera, et cetera. So I do thank everyone for their time. Subhan, do you have any questions or any comments?
Oh, you're on mute, Subhan.
Mute. Sorry, now look, I just want to share my personal experience just of late. Salim's aware of this, but I've just started using Microsoft Lists about 2 weeks ago, inspired by this upcoming presentation, but also I've started using Loop. I had a very silly problem that happened to me a couple of weeks ago, which was that I had some reoccurring calendars, and I used to put my notes in the calendars. But when you change a calendar and you make a change to the setting and the original, I lost most of those notes. And then I realized, okay, you know what, I need to start being a little bit more strategic about how I'm doing things. And then I realized, okay, so I had a to-do list somewhere, and then I had like a way of working, which was my planning was somewhere else. And then I was just like then I find that I spend most of my time I'm going and updating 2-3 different systems. And then I was like, nah, we've got to do things in a smarter way. And so I've started using Loop actually in some of my internal meetings. And I'm finding exactly as you showed that, when you start assigning tasks, you can start putting it against people. And then it also is like, it also starts popping up for them on their calendars. They need to get to it. In that sense, I think it's been really powerful. And I like the idea that you just update everything in the one place, but then it will go to 4 or 5 different areas. Really finding that the flow has been quite easy to set up, as I think Kevin's was just alluded to. I think I had a crack at it about a year ago, and I went, or maybe a little bit longer, and I went, nah, this is too hard. I'll get one of the techie guys to do it. But now it's like I've started using these things myself, and it's actually really powerful to the point where on a personal level, I've now pulled up Microsoft Lists, and my wife and I were just going through and adding all of the recent purchases we've got to track all the warranties and all of that.
Stop showing off, Subhan.
No, I'm telling you, this stuff's actually really easy to use, and it's brilliant. So thank you so much. I think this has come at a really good time because I think we're all being bombarded with all kinds of new AI this and new this and new that, and it's just like, okay, so it's great, it's all there, but how do you make it work? And more importantly, how do you make them work together?
Yeah,
so I thought
absolutely.
That was really
I couldn't agree more with you, Subhan, and it is scratching the surface. So obviously there's so much more that can be done. Bringing order to that is probably one of the key challenges that we've seen. Just like you described, that overwhelming of when do I use what, is it applicable here or not? So bringing order into not just Microsoft and beyond, I think that's, where we know we can help, and we would be more than happy to help. But I appreciate the opportunity today to take you through some examples. We are going to send out a little feedback form, so I would love to hear back on what has worked well, what you would like to hear more on. So thank you again for the opportunity, Salim.
Thanks, everyone. And just
Wonderful.
mindful of time, we are out of time. Thanks, everyone. And have
Just
a great
sorry,
Friday.
one thing. There is
weekend.
one quick question. Sorry, one quick question from Michaela that's just popped up. If we could just answer that one. The answer is yes, but I think it should come from Kevin just to clarify.
I can't see the. Sorry, Michaela.
It's in the queue. And yeah, it's just, can you use the programs
can you
and
see
combine
these programs and combine with email tasks as it gets pretty hectic? Not so basically the same. Yes. So again, email tasks, if you're referring to flagging emails that go into to-do, that will certainly work the way it did. Is that what you're referring to? Yes. Okay. I can see a thumbs up. I'm assuming that's what you were referring to. So again, yes, natively integrated. So that flow it stays the way it was. So flagging emails that will pop up on your to-do and pass on to whatever list that you have set up. Exactly right.
Excellent. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. And
fantastic.
Hopefully we'll see you next time on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.